We're just looking at the Exodus chapter 33, 14 through 16. I want to give you this sermon with the title, Presence Over Success. Presence over success. Let me begin with telling you our church status, by the way. I'm a church planter. I started this new church, and this cross church has been established, newly, and then we're established on this earth. It's by grace of God and then destiny of God. And then we started a new ministry and a new church right here. I've been in church planting and then also just pastoring our church for the Fort Worth area in the past, several years. When I just planted the church, I started this church, I have many practical questions like this way. Will people come? Will the church become established strongly? Sometimes I just asking myself and then having these practical questions, will we have enough finances? Will we just worship because we didn't have worship places before, so they gathering, we gather, at my apartment in the beginning of this church, by the way. Who will serve with us? That's the practical questions. We need the human resources of serving together and then just taking care of the ministry. That's the question, of the practical thing. And how can we reach the more people? That's the evangelism questions that we always are asking about. So we reaching out to people and then really sensitively take that perspective and then also get us evangelistic strategies. Always we have it. How can this ministry grow? Definitely, I always just thinking about it. These are the very real questions the ministry happen in the real world, right? So we need a place to worship. We need people to serve. We need finance sources. And then, of course, as a pastor, I want our church to grow. I want more people to hear the gospel. And I want people to come to Christ. Now, I want the next generation to be raised in the faith. And then also, I want the church to make the impact in our society and community. This is nothing wrong with wanting fruit. But somewhere along the ways, the one question can begin to dominate my heart and my, thoughts. How can I make this ministry successful? From some point, that dominate over my life and my perspective all the time. This is not only the pastoral questions. All we are having this kind of a perspective and then also reality, by the way. So when you start the business, by the way, what you guys really consider about it? You need a property. You need to get a successful, outcome, right? When you guys study, what you guys really expected, it's a good grade and then good result. And then that's what you guys really asking and then looking forward. Now, we want to be recognized in our careers. Next step that we need to get a better job and a better place that we need to go. And those are, things that we are always caring about. Some of the parents that you guys are caring about the kids, and the kids will be well and then do well, and then they just well educated under the good education system, by the way. You're always caring about those kind of things. So without even realizing it, but all those, realistic questions and practical things and approaches that you guys are having, we can bring to think that if the things are going well, then we automatically think that that's going to be successful. But this afternoon, I just want to ask you an uncomfortable question like this way. What if we get everything? We got successful. But God is not with us. Would you still call that success? Imagine the church growing rapidly. More people are coming and the finance is stable and that the programs are excellent. People in the community are talking about the church, saying this church is nice and fancy and doing great. But what if God is not here? Could we really call that a spiritual success? One of the, our greatest dangers is not a failure, but maybe even greater danger is succeeding without God. When things are going so well that we no longer desperately seek Him. We don't really seek the God, and that we do not really, pray for His guidance. We don't feel any of the hungry, inside of our spirituality for His presence. That brings us to the meaning, message for, this afternoon, presence over success. What God gives us matter, the fruit He gives us matter, but even more important is whether God Himself is with us. It is not simply about how far we go. It is about who goes with us. We got to Exodus chapter 33, to understand our passage. We need to remember what happened immediately before the Exodus chapter 33. In chapter 32, if you flip it up, goes to the previous chapter. What happened was that Moses was on the mountain Sinai meeting with God. But while Moses was on the mountain, the Israelites down there, made a golden calf and worshiped that idol. At the very moment God was establishing His covenant with Israel, Israel was breaking that covenant immediately. Even though while, Moses is receiving that covenant from God, and the mountain Sinai, but down there, they are worshiping idols, breaking that covenant, with and against the God. Then we come to Exodus chapter 33. God tells Moses that Israel can continue to go to and forward and promised land Canaan. He will send the angels before him. Their enemies will be driven out. They can still enter the land, flowing with the milk and honey. That's the God just to tell, Moses, you can go. In other words, if you got the, Exodus chapter 33 and Exodus chapter 32 and then golden calf, adultery, and then golden calf adultery after that, Exodus chapter 33, God just to say like Moses, you go, but Israel can still get what they really want. That's the promised land. That's why they wandered in the wilderness. How many years? 40 years. After 40 years, they almost got there. They still have a destination. They still have a promise. They still have a victory. They can have Canaan land. That is a promised land of God. But then God says something shocking. If you're just looking at the Exodus chapter 33, I want you guys to look at verse 3. God says, "But I will not go up among you." He said, "But I will not go up among you." Watch this. This is the real critical, moments of the Exodus chapter 33. Israelites can't have a Canaan without God. They can't have a blessing without His presence. They can't reach the destination without His championship. Success is still with the Israelites. It's possible, but God will not go with them. And that raises the questions for us as well. Do we want what God can give us, or do we want God Himself? This is a question beyond the Moses' prayer in verse 14 through 16. We have to thinking about today's passage, Exodus chapter 33, 14 through 16. Moses, prayer to God, and then his conversation with God. And then we are just navigating, three different elements and factors that we have to remember all the time. Number one, I'm bringing up this question: why do we need most? I want you guys to repeat after me. The promise. I want you guys to repeat after me. The promise of His presence. What do we need most? The promise of His presence. I want you guys to look at, verse 14. He says, and He said, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. You know what? The key phrase is, my presence will go with you. The Hebrew expressions, beyond the word presence, literally referring to the God's face. Even though you know that, throughout the scripture, many times seeking God's face means seeking His personal, presence. He's a nearness, and then He's the fellowship, He's the championship, and then He's the presence with the people. So when the, author of the people and then character of the, Bible says that I really seek God's face, that means He doesn't want to, they do want to get the God's appearance or image or something like that. No, that's not, true, by the way. But the people really seeking the God's people, God's, face, that means that they want God's presence with them. So God does not simply tell Moses, I will give you the better road. I promise you, I will give you everything you need. And I guarantee that everything will go exactly the way you want. Now, that's not God's promise to Moses. Instead, God gives Moses something far greater. He said, I will go with you. What does that mean by that? Just think about that. I want you guys to think about that. This phrase and the God's promise, I will go with you. What was the Israelites' the greatest crisis at a moment? What is that? Everybody knows that. Wasn't it the possibility that they might not enter the Canaan? Or was it the possibility that they might not have a possessed land, flow with the milk and honey? Or they losing that opportunity, that property of the promised land, Canaan? Or something that, something other than that. No, that's not true, by the way. The greatest crisis was the possibility of the losing God's the presence with them. This is why God's promise in verse 14, my presence will go with you, was more, precious than any guarantee of the success, by the way. When I was a young minister student, by the way, I once had a conversation with a retired pastor. From my perspective, he had to be a very successful pastor because he pastored a large church with 2,000-3,000 people back then. But nowadays, we have a lot of the mega churches listed out, Texas or all around the people. But when I was a young 20-something, we have just a few of the people, it's just gathering, thousands or something like that. He had at least 2,000-3,000 people, gathering a large church, mega church pastor. And he had to even serve the, presence of his denomination. For example, SBC, he is the presence of the SBC. And with his word, everything is going to be happening. That much powerful, influential. As a young minister, just the beginning of my ministry journey, I look at him and I thought, this is the what successful pastors look like. But one day, that retired pastors had a chance to meet with me and having a little small conversation with me. He reflected on his ministry. He said something that has surprised me. He confessed in front of me. He said, I fail in ministry. I fail in my ministry. I couldn't understand that. I thought, Pastor, how come how could you say that? You pastors a large church, you serve the thousands of people, you were respected through the, denomination. A lot of the people just follow you and everybody respects you. How come you, fail the ministry? But I remember he meant was something like this, in continuing conversation with me. He said, looking back, I think I pursued a success too much. And I wanted the church to grow. I wanted to accomplish something. I want to be recognized, but I'm not sure I pursued the presence of God with the same passion. He's the confession stay with me for a long time. And at the end of his ministry, the most important question was no longer much did I accomplish, how much I successful. But the question was, he reflected himself and did I walk with him? Did I actually go with him? The church people, this is a question for us as well. If the Israel entered Canaan, the promised land, but God was not with them, could that really be called success? No, I don't think so. Our greatest blessing is not everything goes well. Our greatest blessing is that God goes with us. So our prayer must become more than, Lord, make me successful, make my ministry successful, make my church successful. But our prayer must be, Lord, please go with us. This is the promise of His presence. Second thing is we just want to navigate and then just finding out, what did Moses choose? I want you guys to repeat after me. The priority of His presence. One more time. The priority of His presence. Let's look at verse 15. Moses responds in like this way. And he said to him, if your presence will not go with me, do not bring up from here. We usually read this verse without realizing how radical Moses' statement really is. Where is the Moses refusing to go without God? That's the Canaan. How come you guys think about it? Sometimes you guys are thinking about it. Moses, from the young age, not a young age, a long time ago, he started his ministry in 40 years, Exodus ministry, right? He just wandered the 40 years and then right before entering into the promised land. He's a longing. He was, seeking. And then he's just expecting it. And then he's really, really excited about the goal into the promised land. That is a Canaan. Israelites, the same thing. First generation passed away. And the second generation just waiting for the, promised land of Canaan. But this is the land that God promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is the destination toward which Israelites had been traveled since leaving Egypt. This is the land flowing, with the milk and honey. That's the, significant sign of the God's blessing for Israelites. But at a moment, what happened was, and Moses said, God, even you give us the dead land. If you're not going with us, do not send us there. In other words, I'm just going to more strong word that I can just describe like this way. I do not want Canaan without you. But I just retweak it and understand the situation. And now Moses is not rejecting the promised land. But Canaan was the God's promise, definitely. And Israel was supposed to go there. But the issue is not whether Canaan, the promised land, is good or not. But the issue is priority. Moses is saying Canaan is important, but God is more important. The destination matters, but the one who walks with us matters more. The blessing matters, but God givers matters more. The success matters, but the presence of God matters more. This is why verse 15 captures the heart of today's message. Presence over success. For Moses, the success was not simply arriving in a Canaan, the promised land. Success was arriving in a Canaan with God. And this challenged the way we sometimes approach our faith. Sometimes without realizing, we can turn God into the means to get what we really want. So sometimes we thinking about it. Sometimes we manipulate and then utilized, in order to be successful, we're using God so many times. Unfortunately, if I trust God, we just think about, my life will go well. We easily think about, if I pray God, God will open up the way and the opportunity I want. If I serve the God faithfully, we expect that He will bless us and make my plan, successful. Yes, God is the good Father. I'm not rejecting that. He is still blessing us, giving the good things, because He is our Father of the heaven. But we can't bring it to our need and the desire before Him. Sometimes, we need to pray. We need to ask God, and also we just begging the God, would you please help me, because of your desire. But if that becomes the center of our faith, that's your top priority, eventually we may begin to love the Canaan, and God gave us more than the God who gave us the Canaan. Which one is your priority? The Canaan? The God gives us more? Or the God Himself who gave us this Canaan? You know what? Moses turned that completely around. His prayer is essentially this: God, I do not want you simply because of what you are giving me. Even if you do not get everything I want, I still want to go with you. This is especially important in the ministry. You know what? There's a strange danger in the ministry. We can do things for God while slowly losing our walk with God. So many times, we can prepare the servant to lead a worship and serve the people and building the ministry and work for the church growth. Yet, somewhere along the way, the question can change the form from is the God with us to how successful are we? So before asking how successful our ministry is, perhaps we needed this question and ask these things: are we still walking with God? Even if we move a little more slowly, even if results do not come as quickly as we hoped, walking with God is more important. So Moses says, if you do not go with us, we will not go. This is the priority of His presence. Last thing is, what sets us apart from the world? I want you guys to repeat after me: identity of His presence. Moses then takes us one step further. In verse 16 he says, "For how shall it be known then I found a favor in your sight? I and your people is not in your going with us, so that we are distinct, I and your people, from every other people on the face of the earth." You know what? So Moses asked, how will people know that we are your people in this verse? He asking about that. And his answer is clear: because God, you are with us. I want you guys to thinking about at this moment, thinking about the Israelites, by the way. When you compare to the other tribes and the nations, in compared to the, Israelites, what is the greatest of things the, Israelites have? To be honest, Israelites that didn't have much of the, boasting about. They had recently been a slave in Egypt. They're just escaping from there. They were not known for the military strength. They do not have any of the, military system, by the way. And they did not have a, impressive kingdom or greatest civilizations, or they have any of the power, they have resources. No, they just wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. What they have is just nothing on their hands, by the way. They're wandering through the wilderness, and how come it's going to be great? That situation, that status is Israelites actually, realistically, we can just describe like this way. But they had something no other nations had it in the same covenantal sense. What is that? Israelites. In Israelites, God was with them. Israelites, uniqueness was not found in Israelites' greatness. It was found in the greatness of God who dwell among the Israelites. Their abilities did not set them apart from the world. Their accomplishment did not set them apart from the world. Their possessions did not set them apart from the world. But the presence of God set them apart from the world. So to Cross Church, I want you guys to just think about and then just the having of these things. Let's just apply these things to the church today. What makes our church different from the world? We had a praise team. I really like them. Their music is good, and their passion is great. And then all the people we have, great people are just gathering together. But, when you just compare to the world still has the greater music than us. The world has the talented speaker. So many people are much more talented speaker than I am. The world has an excellent program. The world has a warm community. So you can find out a lot of the communities warmful and successful and greater than us. There are many organizations doing the wonderful things for the people in need. But I want you guys to think about, what should the people encounter when they come into the church, our church, that they cannot find it anywhere else. That is the God. That is the God's presence with us. The living God among His people. And that's our distinguishable distance, element that we should have. We gather to worship Him. We listen to His word, and we love and serve one another because God is with us. The living God among His people. And so great is the strength of the church. It's not your music, your facilities, your talented people just gathering together or programs, an excellent, system on it. No, that is not true. Our church is the greatest strength is. God is with us. That's why we keep it up and then must remember all the time. What makes the church is the presence of God among His people. As we looked at our church, I had heard many wonderful things. So many things, happening, recently. We went to the Oklahoma mission trip, and then also we try to just reaching out to, more people. We try to just, raising the ministry among us, and then reaching to the people, and evangelism, and then also helping others, and then also our worship is very, very good. And 2 different, congregation gathering. Our number is growing. From the beginning of the last year to compare to the right now, we're pretty much, growing pretty well. You are one of my favorite people, and the greatest of people are just gathering and serving people, serving in the church. That's the wonderful things that we have. Right? But I don't want you guys to just miss it out. It is not attendance. It's not a program. It's not a talent or pastors or something, worship team or things like that. Those things matter. I don't reject that. But we should offer God our best. Definitely true. But those things that do not make the church the church. What makes the church is the presence of God among His people. God is with us. God is here. That's what I want to hear the people outside of the church. That's what I desire, that God is with us. People witnesses God is with these people and then also this church. May people encounter the presence of God in our worship. May they experience God working through His word. May they see the living God through the love and serve the living of His people. May this continue to be our church, that's seeking the presence over the success. The message this afternoon is simple. Verse 14, God says, my presence will go with you. That is a promise of His presence. Verse 15, Moses said, if your presence will not go with us, do not send us. This is the priority is his presence. And then lastly, verse 16, Moses says that God's presence is what distinguishes His people from the world. That is the identity of His presence. So in the end of the most important questions, we can ask, and not simply how far we go and how successful we are, but it goes with you, God, presence over success. Let me close up this sermon with a illustration. One thing that I just want to give you something. Our church is a church planting status. I'm a church planter. Our church is still small. The season has been I'm getting to work hard, and so the very little result. Sometimes 3-4 years without fruit or great consequence. It is not easy to go further and then continue to do this. Many of the disappointments and the discourages, So sometimes I ask God, Lord, am I really supposed to keep this ministry? Lord, am I supposed to keep walking this road? I always asking by myself and then asking God in a prayer. But through all the season, God has taught me one thing that I keep it in my mind. I'm never going to lose this one. He has not always given me the result that I want. He has not always shown me the fruit that I expected, but He taught me that He has given me His presence is with me all the time. When I could not see the fruit, He was there. When I was discouraged, He was there. When I didn't know what to do next, He was there. This is why I continue to serve as a church planter today. Not because I can say that my ministry has always been successful. Not because I always see the great result and consequence. But I continue because God is with us. So this has become my prayer. This is my confession. Lord, even if the fruit comes slowly, I will keep walking with you. Even if the road is very difficult, I will keep walking with you. Even if the people do not recognize what I do, I will keep walking with you. If you are with me, I will keep walking this road with you. This is my prayer. This is my confession. Presence over success. Dear Heavenly Father, really appreciate your message today. Every single one of us here will receive your message, presence over success. So many times we miss it out that this is the important, most important thing. We pursue the success all the time. But the Lord is more than success. Your presence is more important. Please be with us. We want to confess that if you do not go with us, we do not want to go. But if you are with us, we keep walking with you. Dear Heavenly Father, please pour out your grace upon all the people gathering here. Presence over success. Your presence is more important than our success. Presence over success. Let me bless you guys with the benediction. May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all forever and ever. At this moment, all God's people say, Amen.